Not very bright.
One, yours doesn't have. So we're keeping you in the semi-automated mindset, I just want to know.
Darren's going to.
At the end of business that we always report on, which is our ad hocs. So I didn't report out on those because it's any changes or nope, seeing none. Okay. Any member of the public can address the commission on any subject not on the agenda. So if there's anyone that wants to speak on an item not on the agenda, we could entertain those right now. Otherwise, if it's someone wants to speak on an item that is on the agenda, please submit your speaker card to the secretary. Okay? So the first item of business is approval of draft minutes from the September 24th, 13 meeting, which were, Councilor Schmidt, verbatim minutes. So I'm sure we're going to have no comments on the 46 pages of verbatim minutes.
I didn't read them all because I gave up. It's too much.
That was the comment. Well, that's one thing that I think we should comment on is that format, at least this first time through, relative to other formats.
If you have some changes too.
No, I know there will be some changes and stuff, but any comments just on the format? It is definitely a lot to wade through. Any other comments? Keep trying it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, my comment was that the verbatim from the commissioners was useful, but there was also the full transcript of what the presenters said, even though there were, was documentation supporting that. So it really felt overwhelming and like a lot of unnecessary detail, in my opinion, as well. I was just wondering if that is a possible area we could cut back.
You mean cut back on the presenters' comments to commissioners' comments?
Well, unless I read it wrong, it seemed like everything that was said at the entire meeting was there, including the presentation to us, not just the responses.
It's a transcript.
So I think the presentation to us was the information that was already available in the attachments. That part seemed...
Right, but it might not be easily available when these minutes are posted online, just as a...
True.
or to council. I'm just devil's advocating.
Yeah, no.
Keith?
Yeah, I don't have any great words of wisdoms. That I thought it worked reasonably well, that it was verbatim and seemed accurate the spots I looked at, but it was, it's big. It's a lot to wade through. So if you want someone just to skim through it and see what do they talk about, that's hard to do. I'm not sure whether I'm for it or against it.
Okay,
I thought it looked
let's try it again next time then. Yeah, Abby?
Because I had to leave early last meeting, I personally found it extremely useful. I realize it's very content-rich. However, we tend to spend an enormous amount of time at the beginning of meetings going over minute corrections. And I think, thinking of that from an efficiency perspective, we won't have to spend that much time on minutes because what was spoken about is right there in black and white, and you can refer back to it. Yes, as a document, it's kind of thick, but there's really nothing to review because it's all there, and then if you want to review a specific section, you just go to that section. So I kind of liked it, to be honest. So.
And the other thing is that as we're going on and on about some subject, if we recognize that we're going to have to read that in the minutes, maybe we'll be more efficient sometimes on these issues.
I think so. That's just my opinion.
Deirdre, did you have any comment on that?
I like it. I think it's great.
That's to the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, staff like it too. I mean, it saved us a lot of time, for Catherine and for us reviewing it and then re-correcting it after. So we'd like to see it continue or try it again at least for another month.
We should try it. So I think there are some changes or corrections.
I just wanted to comment on the format
Okay,
first.
okay.
I think it would be extremely helpful further away from the issue if you're ever looking back trying to figure out what went on. So I like it generally for that reason. I think it would be great to add at the beginning a summary of any action that was taken and page references by topic. So somebody who's scrolling page or even line references. So somebody who's looking for a particular subject doesn't have to read all the way through page 20 to find what they're looking for. And then I did have some edits. On page 14, line 502. It says, with the dollars and cents and the zero revenue and not having Cubberley stand all by itself, you should delete the not, because it was the fact of Cubberley standing by itself that was the issue I was getting at there. Then page 35, line 1215. At the end of the line, it says inaudible, and I believe what I was talking about there was Brown Act complications. We're going to have some Brown Act complications. So insert that at the end of the sentence.
Which line again?
1215. And then page 39. Line 1338, there's another inaudible. Because there was some controversy and there wasn't a unanimous decision, that was about feeding wildlife. And I think it was saying that feeding wildlife, the ad hoc, is still sort of hanging in there in limbo because there wasn't a unanimous action. Does that make sense, Catherine? And that's it.
Other corrections or explanations of inaudibles?
I had one on page 5. It actually, Chair allowing, line 87, said the next item of business is to review the draft report, cost of services study. That's been to the Finance Committee. It says of council and is proposed to go in November. I believe that was line 187. that's been to the Finance Committee. I think it said should have been and is proposed to go to council in November, but I'm not 100% if you recall.
Yeah, that says it's been to the Finance Committee of Council and is proposed to go in November
Oh, that's correct.
to council.
So then that's correct as stated? That makes sense to you? I wasn't,
Yeah.
okay.
There's
Yep.
an implied council.
Yeah.
You can go in.
Okay, I wasn't
or
sure.
To council.
Okay.
Any others? Okay, can we have a motion to approve as corrected?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Cromie, second. Commissioner Rectal, all in favor? Aye.
Just so we make sure your mics are on when we talk, because they complained that they couldn't understand. That's why a lot of the inaudibles are in there.
We need one more mic for this end of the table. That would make a huge difference, because if we have a presenter and we have Councilmember Schmidt and we have Ed, then Stacy and I have to really fight for that mic. You know, I like to talk. I mean, if this one's over there, then we just have this one for all four of us.
Region, yeah.
Makes it really tricky.
You guys can get along. It'll work. Okay, so the next item of business is an update on the Regional Water Quality Control Plant landscaping project, and Julie Weiss is here to give a follow-on presentation. We welcome you.
Take one of these.
This one and share.
Good evening, my name is Julie Weiss, and can you guys hear me? Is it on? Okay. And,
There you go.
there we go. And I work at the Regional Water Quality Control Plant, and I'm here tonight to give you an update about the landscaping project that's occurring in the interior and around the exterior of the plant. And I was actually here a little over 2 years ago, sharing with you the conceptual plans for the project. And I'm very excited to show you the final designs and to show you how we incorporated some of your comments into the plans and a few extra things that we think would be of interest to you based on conversations I had with Darren Anderson and Rich Bicknell and others. As a reminder of where we are located, we are out across the street from the airport off of Embarcadero Way. And to access the plant, unfortunately, we don't have a laser pointer, do we? Okay. So in absence of that, I'm just trying to show in here how you get to the plant. The very bottom. Thank you. Thank you. So the very bottom here, this is Embarcadero Way, and this is how you enter the plant. And this will be the interior, the entrance to the plant, which is also where the new household hazardous waste station is located right there, which we're also landscaping the interior of the plant. And then this entire area along Embarcadero and Harbor is where the exterior project site is that we're also landscaping. I know that there's two newer commissioners that weren't here when I came here a couple years ago. So if you're not familiar with the plant, our main mission is to keep pollutants, biological pollutants, out of San Francisco Bay. We're House and Public Works and the Environmental Services Watershed Protection Group, and a lot of our interests are similar to the interests you have, which is to protect our watershed and the receiving waters to San Francisco Bay. We actually serve 6 communities, one of which is Palo Alto, and this project is funded by all 6 of those partner agencies because they're all responsible for the upkeep of the plant. A strong component of our program isn't just the operations of the plant, although that's a primary one, but we have a very strong educational program. And we have a teacher who goes out to classrooms all throughout our service area and talks to kids about watershed, pollution prevention. We talk about the Baylands a lot. We give tours to hundreds of students of all ages from grade school and college at the plant. And a lot of those students then go out to the Baylands afterward to try to make the teachers are helping them to make the connection between what the plant does and what happens out there at the Bay. So there is definitely some interface there between what we're doing and then some of the interests that you have. We are required by previous construction projects over the last several decades to maintain the landscaping around the plant. And so our goal is to refresh that landscaping, a lot of which has expired over the years. Also the irrigation, which is completely defunct at this point. We want to make it safer because there are areas that the public use and staff uses that could be a lot safer. We want to make it more enjoyable to use for everyone who's out there. One of our major goals was to leverage the existing vegetation. Our goal is not to scrape everything and start anew. We want to use as much as what we can that's already out there. We are aspiring to meet the bay-friendly guidelines and use as much beneficial plant material as possible. That doesn't mean exclusively natives. It means regional natives and site-appropriate species, because a lot of our natives couldn't provide the high-level screening that we need to have. And we also are going to be irrigating all of the landscaping with recycled water. We have taken a lot of input over the course of this project from these groups that I'm sure you already know. We spend a lot of time with our Bayland stakeholders. You know Emily Renzel and Enid Pearson. You may know Bill Lycum. He's the gentleman who's been studying the foxes out there. We talk with our businesses on Embarcadero Way. We spend a lot of time talking to our city staff. We met with commissions, this one, the Art Commission, Planning and Transportation Committee. And so we have done our best to incorporate all the input that we've heard into this design, and we feel like we've been able to do that pretty well. In speaking with Rich and Darren before this meeting, I wanted to get a feel of what you might be most interested in hearing about, because there's a lot of things that we could talk about with the project. What I heard was that you're going to be really interested in the plant palette, which you'd also said at our first meeting. A couple of you had said, please try to make the plant palette as productive as possible. What we're doing to protect wildlife, and tell us about what's going on with the trees around the Baylands area, especially if any are going to be slated for removal. So before I show you the final landscape plans, I want to touch on these briefly so you know that the plans were informed by these things that we think you're going to care about. We spent a lot of time putting together the plant palette and leveraged the existing Baylands master plant list. We consulted again with Canopy, the California Native Plant Society, Audubon Society, Actera, again, the most active Bayland stakeholders that we've already discussed. And we put together this plant palette, and that's also in your attachments there. After we put that together, we had a Bay-friendly landscaping advisor take a look at that. That is a regional program, if you're not familiar with it, that provides guidelines on how to have Bay-friendly landscaping, which includes both the hardscape and the softscape as well. We then also had it reviewed by Hort Science, which is a consultant that we contract with. They're currently doing a research project about how recycled water in our service area impacts redwood trees, which is one of the most salt-sensitive species. They're also going to be monitoring our site, landscape site, on a couple locations, and we asked them to look at our plant palette to make sure it could survive in the conditions, especially around the exterior of the plant, because that is not a friendly place to live if you're a plant. So they reviewed that and assured us that the plant palette with our existing conditions will do very, very well. In addition to that, I want you to know that our recycled water, the salinity of our recycled water is, we are anticipating that that's going to be reduced over the next couple of years because of some projects that are going on in our partner agencies to reduce saltwater intrusion into the sanitary sewer system. So we're anticipating that the salinity of that water is going to go down even more. So our plants, which should already do well in that area, are going to have an even easier time over the next couple of years as that salinity goes down. And again, we will be monitoring those areas to see what's going on with the salinity. Another area of concern was what are we going to be doing during construction to protect wildlife, and also how does the design enhance and become more beneficial for wildlife. So we are working very hard to limit construction, or to get construction going as fast as we can in January, so we can have the exterior done before bird nesting season kicks in and before baby animal season kicks in, which is around March or April for the most part. So that is our goal, is to get that going right away. When we first started this conversation, we started noticing that there was this native gray fox population that was starting to expand, and there was a lot of interest in understanding them better. And although it was not a requirement for this project, we did hire biologists to teach us more about the population that was out there and give us recommendations on how to reduce hazards for that species. It's really extend to other mammals and other species as well. Some of the recommendations she provided are things like, about when and where to have construction, so we're not stressing den sites, and we do have a couple of den sites on plant property out there. Avoiding construction hazards. This is showing you a picture of a culvert. This one's actually filled in, but in construction conditions, you can have all sorts of piping and open areas, and you want to keep those blocks so they don't crawl in and get stuck in there. We're going to be providing the contractor, requiring them to have a training session so that they are really familiar with all the recommendations that the biologists put together. And we'll be tracking that to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to help reduce hazards for wildlife during construction. One of the things we wanted to understand better was what's going on with the trees out there. A lot of those trees were planted long before any of us were working there at the plant. And although we had a plant palette and we had the planting plan, we didn't know how many of those trees still remained or the health condition of those trees. So we did do a survey. We had all of them GPS tagged, identified, the species identified, and also their health assessed. So now we have a complete assessment of about 300 trees that are out there and about 60 or so shrubs and their general health condition. This is just a little screenshot of one area. This is the area that's closest to Bixby Park. And of the 300 trees, there's about 28 trees that were pretty diseased, and those mostly are the myoporums that are out there. There's a disease that's going throughout the state that's killing off a lot of them, and we are going to be pulling out we have pulled out about 28 of those trees, most of the 28 trees so far, because they were going to have to come out in the next couple of years anyway. Before we did that, we invited all of our stakeholders out, and then Dave Doctor, who was serving as our arborist at the time, and a couple of our tree guys to walk the site with us, so everyone got to see and touch and know exactly which tree was going to come out. And there were no objections to that whatsoever. And then, of course, we went through the sign and notification process as well. So we have good information, and we have communicated very clearly with the public about the trees that were to come out. And I should also note that most of those trees that are coming out are right against the fence line of the plant. Most people can't even see them anyway. They're dense. They're far, far back into a thicket with other trees in front of them. So before we show you the final designs, just to refresh you, I'm sure most of you are out there most of the time, or a lot of the time anyway, but these are pictures that were taken right after this area was mown, and so it looks tidier than usual. But we do get calls, I've had calls forwarded to me from community services saying, can you do something? It's looking a little bit ratty out there. So, sometimes the weeds can get pretty tall. Down here in this bottom corner here, this is the corner of Embarcadero and Harbor as it's going towards Bixby. This area does not have a pedestrian walkway, and so runners have to go run in the street, so it's not as safe as what it could be. And you'll see that some of the, this is pooping out on me. Some of the screening along the fence line is getting a little bit thin. So our design is going to rectify that as well. So this, the moment you've been waiting for, final design. This is right here is Embarcadero Way, and the first thing you'll notice after construction is completed, if you were to go walk the site, is that there's a pedestrian walkway there now, so people don't have to go walk in the street. It's an asphalt parkway. They'll start walking up, have a meandering path that goes to the corner of Harbor, which you'll see in a moment. You'll see that the telephone poles that are there will be removed. You'll notice that almost all of this tree screening that's there is going to remain and stay intact. As you're walking, you'll notice over time, as it starts growing in, that there will be a mix of native grasses, ground covers, native and site-appropriate shrubs. And then if you were to keep going up the path, you would see that it's going to start veering off a little bit, going inland a little bit. And what we've done in this area is that we're going to be raising the elevation just a little bit so that we can have layers of screening going up towards the fence, so that we can use the same kind of plants but still get more screening from them because they'll be higher up. As you're walking along the trail, you'll see an interpretive sign, which is going to look like the other interpretive signs out there, so we're not going to throw some other random design out there. And we're thinking that this is going to probably discuss the role that the wastewater treatment plant has on protecting the bay. We could also be discussing the beneficial uses of recycled water out there as well. You'll also see that the post and swag chain fence is going to be removed. And a couple of things that are going to be going on that you won't see, but that will be happening. This is where we're going to have one of the salinity monitoring sites. And one of the things that we've really committed to is having a lot better maintenance for this landscaping. Over the past decades, sometimes the plants have gone in and maintenance hasn't always been followed up on over the years, and that's in part, brought us to how it looks today. Plants do expire over time, but we also could have done a better job with maintenance. And we are committed to having an IPM approach to the weed aspect of it, which IPM is integrated pest management. And what that essentially means is that you use pesticides, herbicides as a last result, and you're doing everything possible for that to prevent weeds. We're going to be using a lot of mulch out there, about 6 inches of mulch around the individual plantings, which is what the Baylands already does, and that's hugely reduced our pesticide use throughout the city. And we have maintenance covered under the new Parks and Maintenance contract that went into effect recently, and it's going to require mechanical removal of weeds and then set thresholds for weed tolerance, which means that the closer you are to the trail where someone might care about weeds, we'll have a lower threshold of tolerance. We're not going to be able to avoid every single weed out there at the Baylands, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure, especially as these new plantings get going, that they've got the best chance they have to crowd out the weeds that are there. I'm going to show you a few. I know your primary interest is around the exterior of the plant, but there are some things we're doing in the interior that I thought might be of interest, so I'm just going to show those to you as well. Right now, when you drive up to the plant, this is what you see. It's very utilitarian and industrial, and not very. It's not very inspiring at all. And most of the interior is turf. You'll see some kind of weedy spots here throughout the plant, and all of that's going to go away. When you drive up to the plant now, and this is a very general mock-up of it, you'll see that this is the entrance to the household hazardous waste station going this ways, and then to the left is going to be that gate that you just saw that takes you into the plant. Art and we did have an art requirement for this project, and this is going to be where it's located. This is a piece done by that is being done by Martin Webb, and these are all reclaimed poles from Caltrans that he repurposes, and with his Baylands theme that kind of shows, it's on all 4 sides of the poles, shows kind of the meandering sloughs and birds, and it has that Baylands feel to it. And the grass is going to be here in front. This looks like turf, but it's really that native kind of flowy grass, and so it'll have a nice feel to that. When you enter the plant, the thing that you'll notice right away is that there's going to be a lot less turf, although that turf is getting irrigated right now with recycled water, but it's going to be a lot nicer looking. There's going to be a lot of low ground covers. There's going to be a lot safer wayfinding. Currently, when people are walking around, there's no striping or any way for people to know where to go. So we have a pathway that now extends from the operations building to the admin, and then there will be actually striping. There'll be a clear meeting area for the tours that come out to our plant, the seating area, and more interpretive signage. We actually have 2 employee gardens. If you've been out there, you know we don't have a lot of restaurants out there. We have a lot of people who really like gardening. We actually, in the past, when we've had small gardens, we share meals together and grow the food out there. So we're installing it. Of course, employees have to provide the irrigation and the plant material, but we are providing a spot for them as well as some seating areas. Because right now we have nowhere to sit outside at all. So that's the highlight of that area. Kind of drilling down, this is that pathway from the operations plant to the administration building. This is kind of cool. We're calling this our Walk of Fame. We're going to take manhole covers from each of our partner agencies and powder coat them black and then have them along the pathways they go in. And then you can see here, these are the seating areas again for where tours meet, and these are also some seating areas there. In the plant, we have, remember that one weedy area I showed you that had a picture of the old mural there? So that's going to become a seating area that also has interpretive signage about the benefits and the need for recycled water use, especially in California. Eventually, we're going to have a mural there. It may be done by the same artist who's doing the piece outside, or we may try to get someone else who can do a more realistic image of the bay. But we want to, again, have that connection between what the plant does and the baylands. So that's the overview. We are hoping to, well, the plan is to start construction in January and have the exterior done by March 1st. Again, that's mostly because of animal and nesting season, bird nesting season. And we want the interior done by mid-April or before. And then we are going to have a ribbon cutting and a celebration, because this has been, at that point, an over a 3-year process, and we will definitely be inviting you, and we would love to have you come out and join in the celebration with us. So that is the overview of the project, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have some questions as well.
Great, thank you. A lot of progress in 2 years.
Yep.
It's just terrific design. Everything that you listened to and incorporated, I think it's terrific. I'm not going to make the first and last comments, though, so who would like to comment? Maybe I will. Oh, Commissioner Henderly. Oh, Commissioner Markovich.
So the taller trees that are closer to Bixby Park, what is the natural life cycle on those? Because they're rather tall, so I'm assuming they've been there for quite a long time. Do you expect that they're gonna have their life cycle finished soon, or do you know the timing on that?
A lot of those are that we're not pulling out are the eucalyptus. There's a lot of eucalyptus in the casarinas that are out there. And based on the tree survey, it doesn't look like they're going to be expiring soon. I can't tell you that, most of those trees are about 40 or 50 years old that are out there. A lot of them were planted in the 60s and some in the 70s. But so I can't tell you that they're going to have another 20 years or so. Maybe Walter can tell you. But I can tell you that at least I don't see, like, in the next 10 or 15 years, too many more of those dying based on the condition they're in right now.
Thank you.
I just had a couple questions.
Yeah.
One was, there was a picture in here, and you showed us tonight, of that pipe that you wanted to put a screen, that unused drainage pipe. And my question was just why you would bother to screen it if it's an inoperative pipe. Why not just allow the fox to den there?
Because if there are blockages, they can get stuck in there. So where animals get stuck in there, sometimes they get in there and they can't get back out. They get their head stuck in there and they can't get out. So, we're just following the biologist's recommendations of just screening it off.
Great. My other question was about the timing, with construction starting in January, ending in March. And this attachment in the back, it's all about the gray fox, my questions, suggested that February through May was the worst time to be engaged in construction activities.
In potentially high impact areas. So
Right.
we are not doing anything next to a den. The areas that we're looking at are load moderate areas. So we're not doing anything next to a den or to a day use area.
Okay, it seems to me that the biggest impact on the gray fox area was putting in that path and replacing the topsoil on, I don't know what page this is, but this page has this shaded area is all going to get new topsoil, and this is sort of the heart of the gray fox area. as
We
I
just
understood
walked
it.
out there the other day with our architect and with Bill Lycum, who is the gentleman who's
Fox
studying
guy.
the foxes. And we are not touching that really dense thicket of trees, which also is
Back in
part
the
of the wildlife corridor.
Okay.
So he's actually feeling pretty good about it. And in one of the corners, that corner of Embarcadero and Harbor, we're actually going to go out right before, we're going to go out with Bill and kind of fine tune where that path goes to avoid some of the areas that they use as kind of like a day den, which means they just hang out there during the day. So.
Great, that answers my question, thanks. I think it looks like a great plan, and you guys did a great job. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I just wanted to ask a directly related question. In looking at the timeline, it seems like you're ready to go with the plan. So is there a reason that you're waiting till December for council approval? There's just their calendars full, or?
Because we're actually waiting for bids right now from contractors, and
I
that's
see.
as soon as we can get it to council. And we're just crossing our fingers that we can really get it going. I mean, if I had my way, we'd be doing it right now, but we're just working through the process.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking that might save you 6 or 8 weeks. Okay, thanks. Hello, Mr. Rectal?
You mentioned about bringing some trees down and planting new trees. What's the net tree impact?
28 trees.
So we take 28 trees down, and how many are planting?
Well, we're planting more than 28.
Okay, so
but
we're gonna have a net increase in trees.
yeah,
Okay. Do you know the numbers?
I'll look that up for you. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay.
No.
But it's a significant increase.
I would say both for trees and shrubs that are also going to provide habitat value and screening as well.
Okay. We're very sensitive to that after the golf course redesign.
Right.
We want to make sure that if we do cut down trees, that we replace them generously, because we don't want to step on any toes. The second thing is I like interpretive signs. I'm very happy you're putting them in. You're talking about the benefits of recycled water. That's a very good topic. But I also would say, especially for kids and nerdy engineers, talk about how does the water treatment plant work? And not just an overview, details, because kids love the details of how does this work and how does this very complicated thing happen.
So we are going to be expanding all of our interpretive signage within the plant because there's only so much we can do. Are you talking about the interior site or the exterior
Both.
plant sign?
Yeah.
So we're actually going to be expanding all of our interpretive signage in the plant, and we probably can't. It's a very complicated process. We might be able to distill it down into the three major sort of sequences that it goes through. But some of the interpretive signage will be standalone to achieve that, and some of it will be more supportive, especially in the areas where people can only go if they're having a tour. So, but I'm hearing that, talk to a couple of different audiences, both kids and adults, that aren't just starting with basic information.
Because I've been places where they have interpretive signs and they're very superficial. You know,
Or they're the same
dirty
old
water goes
information
in,
you've
clean water
heard
goes
before.
out. That doesn't really help me.
Right.
And it's not that complicated. You certainly can, in a slide or two, summarize how does it do that. I think that would be interesting both for adults and kids.
Good comment.
I'm done.
Commissioner Cromie?
It looks really great.
Good, thank you.
It's going to be lovely, I'm sure.
Thanks.
So I was just wondering, with the new trail for the pedestrians and the runners, is there, when it turns that corner and then goes along the road that takes you into Bixby Park, does the trail intersect? How does it meet up with anything that's there currently? What's the transition?
So let me try to find that picture on here for you.
Is it just sort of this seamless connection?
Well, it's not going to go directly into Bixby Park because it ends across the street from Bixby Park, and then people would cross the street to go into Bixby.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all on the west, northwest side of the street.
Okay.
So it's just around the periphery of the plant. We're not doing anything on the other side. So let me just show this because the picture is worth 1,000 words. This is actually. So this is the area that's approaching Bixby Park. This is Harbor. Across the street are the Baylands. And then over here is the entrance and the parking lot to Bixby Park. So the pedestrian path just meanders over here, and then it'll stop, and then people will cross to the other side.
Okay, is that I think I know what you're talking about, so there's a street that can trucks go in, they just cross this little area that,
Yeah, right over here.
Yeah.
So this road, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to blind you there. So this road dead ends at the landfill. And there's a little side back road that a lot of trucks still go in and out. And that's kind of like it's kind of like a little bit of a rougher road, right? But the public doesn't really go in there very much. Yeah.
Yes, I know that I've been walking there sort of behind your site. I've been able to walk through the back way before, and I've walked by where they wash the trucks.
Right,
the truck
right,
wash
right,
there.
right.
I don't know if I was doing it inappropriately or not. Is it not meant to be a connection there?
There's not a connection there, and in part because we're not quite sure what's going to be happening with that area. You know, there's that whole project underfoot of looking at if we could do something different with that Measure E area. So we're not sure what's going to be happening with that area just yet.
So that is that area I'm talking about sort of on the edge of your landscaping?
No, it's inland from it. So if you were to come down this road, which you can't see, is like all the way down here, would be a big, huge map of the plant, and then the back road would be all the way down
So it's
there
really far
at the
away.
bottom. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, and if you want, if it helps you see it, I can highlight a map for you just so you could see that after this meeting.
Right, I was just wondering if this current landscaping project was connected, and it doesn't sound like there's any proximity.
No, we
there.
separated it entirely because we couldn't do anything with that area at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice, the improvements that you're making for the workers there to give everyone a more pleasant environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, anything? Okay.
No, I think it looks great, and the fact that you've had so much input and it's taken you 3 years, congratulations. That's fine. No, I think it's fantastic.
Good.
I had a couple questions. When you correctly spent a lot of time doing a plant palette productive to local wildlife, did you find that there was a lot of trade-off? That you had to kind of, well, this is going to help this species and this is not going to help so much, or was it pretty easy to come up with the right palette there?
I don't think that piece of it was that hard because there's a lot of, regional natives that we're using that are just known to be productive to wildlife in terms of either, harborage, just cover that they provide or, so we really took the recommendations of the Native Plant Society and Audubon because they were saying don't pull out all the dead trees. We need to have some of those dead trees because those are for birds that like to roost up there too.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of it really wasn't that hard because there's so much established information out there.
Okay. And the other question is, respectfully, $1 million? That seems like a really big budget. I think we put a whole park together for $1.6 million or something like that with fields and everything else.
Yeah.
These are very expensive trees.
Well, there's also, remember, a lot of, hardscaping that's going to be going in and seeding areas. And, I think anytime you're talking about that number of plants and dirt that has to go in there, yeah, that's what it costs. And so we are going to be, remember, Palo Alto's contribution to that is just 38%, so it'll be about $38,000 from Palo Alto because those other costs are shared by our partner agencies. But those are projected costs. When we get the bids back in beginning in November, we may be pleasantly surprised that it's less than that. We've also taken a lot of steps to try to reduce those costs because we didn't really like that number either. So we are, we're providing our own city mulch from tree trimming projects, which saved us probably about $100,000 right there. We're doing our own striping. Having our tree guys pull out all the trees. We're doing as much work as that we can so that we're not incurring additional costs.
Big number. Yes, Councilor Schmidt, here.
A question for Rob. I'm very impressed with the diversity of the plant palette there. picking up here, and trees, shrubs, bushes. Are there any plans to utilize this for Bixby Park, at least in a transitional way or some way that the richness of the plants here would have some impact on what is now a bare landscape?
Yes, I believe so. And Aaron Anderson's been working closely with you as well as Rich McNell, who are working on the plans for Bixby. So,
Good.
yeah, they'll very much relate to each other. It's just a matter of funding.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And our next item of business is directly related to that, which is initial draft of the Urban Forest Master Plan, and Walter Pastenmore is going to lead that. Thank you, Walter. Here's a
Thank you, Commissioners. Nice to see everyone again. What I'm planning to do tonight is to give you a quick overview and allow most of our time on this subject for answering questions, because this is a very large document. It's a multi-year undertaking that is just now culminating in a draft. So I don't want to spend time reading any one particular section. I am going to open up to our table of contents, which I think is an appropriate place to start. You'll notice on the opposing page is the relationship to other city documents. The Urban Forest Master Plan was birthed out of the city's comprehensive plan and framed by city's municipal code. So that's the impetus behind creating this plan, and a lot of the direction that's set in the plan actually comes from those guiding documents. The Urban Forest Master Plan also informs other plans. It influences how other plans work. So we fully expect that the Urban Forest Master Plan is going to have a substantial influence on our future sustainability plan for the city. When we revise the city's climate action plan, the water management plan, urban forests directly influence these documents, and there are going to be some cross-cutting themes between those. It also directs some lower-level documents, such as the street tree management plan. We start out the process with a vision, which is our ideal state. So, realize that we may not get there during the implementation period of this plan, but that's where we would like to be someday. There's a lot of very general and lofty concepts in the vision statement, but I think one that really captures the spirit of Palo Alto. So it is important to look at that vision statement before you really understand what we're trying to accomplish in the plan. Next, we talk about all of the information that we know currently about our urban forest. What's transpired over time as far as origins? What are the benefits and value of our urban forest? Are we optimizing what the urban forest can produce? And this has not been a subject that historically has been understood very well. When people think about trees, they usually think that they're pretty. We like trees. They look nice. But we have a much better understanding now with scientifically based models of the monetary value of trees, how we can minimize the cost, maximize the value. And there's a lot of discussion in government these days about treating it more like a business. We have done cost-benefit analysis, and so in that way, it is a business-like approach. but we know that nature cannot be handled like a business. There's a lot of values that we can't monetize. And so we obviously are not going to capture everything. You can't capture experiences of people living in a rich, vibrant urban forest like we have in Palo Alto. And there are some influences that are more qualitative that contribute to our quality of life that are not going to be captured in that cost-benefit analysis. Next, we talk about canopy, how extensive, what does it look like, how healthy is it, the composition. We also felt like it was very important in this information process to survey the community, to assess values that are important. What do people really think about our urban forest? Is it providing the values that are important to the people that live in Palo Alto? We took the survey and analyzed that to identify hot topics, some of the major issues that people are concerned about, and that translated into information about challenges. So that's where you see this next section going to talking about water, development, line clearing. Those very broad topics were addressed in a number of community opinions. And so we felt like it was important to speak much more to what our current state of affairs is with those subjects and how might we address those in the future. We also talked about how do we take care of the urban forest, our stewardship of it. We have different departments that have roles that in the past have been a little bit separated. We've been siloed in some respects. We are now looking at ways to be more collaborative, more comprehensive with our approach, more unified with our approach. And so the chapters about ownership, about City Hall, kind of inform where our process is now. And then finally, after we talk about what does the resource look like, what does the community feel about that resource, how are we taking care of the resource, now we start looking towards the future. What do we need to do as far as goals, policies, and programs to make our urban forest function better in the future than it is now, to meet the goals that are outlined in that vision, to really improve the quality of life across multiple areas for people in Palo Alto. That being said, there's a lot of really detailed nerdy information that I would love to talk about in here, but I think I'd rather defer to the commissioners to ask some questions so I can address what you'd like to talk about.
Great, thank you. Who has questions? Keith, go ahead.
First of all, I was impressed. There's a lot of information. 140 pages of information. It was very good, very dense at times. I would prefer to see a little more conclusions. A lot of times you'd have tables that show certain things, and I'd look through those tables and try and figure out why they put this in here. And I think you have to hit the reader over the head, especially a lot of these readers are not going to be tree experts. Why is this information in there? And really be explicit. Don't assume that they will see the same thing you will see. Say the point of this, from this table we understand this, or maybe it's just purely for information. But right now it's hard to determine when you're trying to make a point and when you're just providing the information.
Thank you.
Okay, I have other stuff, but we'll let people. Should we keep it going? Okay. I have a lot of comments here. I'll just start at the beginning and walk through. I didn't prioritize them, I just went through sequentially. On page 27, we talk about the VOCs that the trees produce. how much of that, when you choose trees, how much of the VOC impact is in the, how much of an impact is VOC production in tree selection?
It's not a very significant air quality impact. We do let it inform our species selection choices. And if you evaluate a list of attributes across tree species, that's one that we're considering of many. So if we have a species that maybe is a marginal performer already, and also producing a high level of VOCs, then we would probably not plant as many of that species.
So it's more of a tiebreaker than a primary. Okay.
So liquid amber, for instance, is a fairly high VOC producer and also not the best performer as far as a street tree goes. So we'll probably be planting much less liquid amber in the future.
Okay. So you mentioned that in there that you don't plant liquid amber anymore. Was that because of VOCs or were there other issues?
No, it's a whole range of performance issues. And you know, that being said, no tree is perfect. All of them have some performance issues. And so we try to minimize those performance issues to the extent possible and gain the maximum benefit. And then there's a lot of value in diversity. So you don't necessarily want to eliminate species. We're more counting on natural mortality. So over a long period of time, we'll eventually phase out certain species or greatly diminish their representation in the overall population.
And one thing that wasn't in here that I really wanted to see was more insight into how you select the trees, particularly the trees that are in parks, and then a totally separate issue is the boulevard trees, because they are so constrained with the sidewalks and the street right there. And distinguishing the different types of trees and their roots. Some have shallow roots that really wreak havoc with sidewalks, and others have deep tap roots and they go straight down. And I would think also the ones with deep tap roots probably are better for water consumption anyway. Is that not necessarily? Sometimes. Okay. And also height analysis, if you're talking about, like in California Avenue, one of the complaints against the trees were that they were blocking the signage. And so a lot of these, and you also have power line issues. So I would think that both those are very important topics that weren't covered in here. And I guess maybe big picture, what is the purpose of this document? Who's the audience that you're trying to reach for this?
It's both the public and also as a guidance for other documents. So you mentioned species selection criteria. Mm-hmm. For our street tree management plan, this document will establish the parameters for that species selection for street trees, and it will do the same thing for individual park management plans.
Okay. Another issue is disease resistance. That wasn't really mentioned. It occasionally was mentioned, but not head on. Is that when you select the trees, how much of a disease resistance is in your selection? Is that a minor effect or is that a major effect?
It's fairly minor, mostly due to the fact that we don't have any diseases that are wiping out entire populations, like some of them back east. We do talk a lot about species diversity, which is one of the primary defense mechanisms for large-scale disease outbreaks. And we have a very diverse species palette right now.
So what are for example, what would be the 3 most popular trees that you're planting today for street trees?
What, planting or what's in the population?
No, planting, the new ones that are going in. Do you know how?
We're currently planting quite a bit of plane tree or sycamore. there's still quite a bit of oaks going in different varieties.
Okay, so that'd be a native live oak.
Some native live oak, some native valley oak, and then we're also having some site-adapted red oaks, and there's some live oaks that are, I think, doing fairly well that are southern live oaks, the Quercus virginiana.
Okay, even though they're not native, they do well in the area?
Yes. California has a very forgiving climate.
And how much the fact that trees, when you're, again, back to tree selection, if trees are native, how much of that is, how important is that in tree selection?
It is very important, and we're going to be providing more emphasis to planting natives in the future. They currently make up a fairly small percentage of the population because in the past, people valued the aesthetics of the tree more than the function and longevity. So there was a lot of out of the area species brought in for one reason or another.
Okay. One thing you talk about in here is the water usage. You compare how much, whether the trees are thirsty or not. If they're not being irrigated, they're just going down deep into the soil and getting the runoff from the previous rainy season. Do we care whether a tree is thirsty or not? How does that affect us? Because we're not irrigating this. This is just, it's going on its own, going down to find water.
Correct, and they find water from landscaping as well as going down deeper to collect it out of water tables or underground, streams and so forth. So it is something that we want to consider. We want to make sure that we have species that don't use more water than necessary. But at the same time, we can train those trees. We can adapt them to the site. So what we're hoping more than species selection is to make sure that the surrounding landscape adapts the trees to low water use.
You mentioned in here about trees that, even though they may not be thirsty trees, they're next to landscaping and they get used to irrigation, and then now they can't live without the irrigation. I assume that it just means that their roots become very shallow and they don't go down deep enough to get the water.
Correct.
And can you wean those trees off?
It depends how long they've been in that type of situation. And you could think about it as if the tree has been accustomed to a certain amount of water for its entire lifespan, it's going to take a long time to wean it to less than that, and you'll probably never get it back to the lowest potential use.
Although young trees, if you water them for 3 years, at that point they're deep enough that they can live on their own. Is it that young trees have more aggressive root growth than older trees?
Young trees are more adaptable. So regardless of the species, you can train a young tree to adapt to a minimum water usage much more easily than older trees.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, one other thing. You mentioned in here about the utility and burying utilities and how that affects the trees, and then now that they're no longer limited by the power lines above it. What is the current status of the utility burying? Are they still burying utilities, or is that?
They still are. It's a very expensive process, and it's very slow process, and it's not the total answer for alleviating impacts to trees, because when you bury utilities, obviously you're going to impact roots. Mm-hmm. And even though you can't see roots, roots are much more extensive than the canopy and just as influential on the longevity and the health of the tree. So we just are exchanging one struggle for another.
When we bury utility lines, does that require regular maintenance, or is that only if there's a fault?
It still requires maintenance. It's probably much less frequent than the maintenance that we have to do for overhead utilities.
You also mentioned solar panels. What's the status right now with solar panels, and that if a neighbor has a tree, can I force him to trim that to have my solar panels exposed to the sun, or what's the priority there?
Currently, state law says whatever was there first takes precedent.
So if I have solar,
So if you install the solar panel before your neighbor plants the tree, then yes, you could require your neighbor to prune or remove that tree to make sure that your solar panel continues to function properly. If the tree was there first, then your solar panel gets shaded, you're out of luck.
and what about, well, I guess boulevard trees? If you already have boulevard trees and you cut a boulevard tree down and the city replaces it, then that has priority? Do you grandfather that in?
Our understanding is that the site was there first, and we are maintaining a tree on that site, even though you may cut down one and, a few months later plant a new tree. We're still maintaining a tree on that site historically.
Okay. Now, on my street, we had a bunch of trees, street trees, and they were cut down because they were diseased. And in here it says that sometimes, I think the quote was, sometimes residents do not request a new tree. I would never request a new tree. I was never asked whether I should request a new tree. This is especially, we're in South Palo Alto, where you have the curbs and the sidewalks right there. So the street tree was in our front yard, even though it was planted by the city. How does that work with the city? When they cut that down, do they normally ask the resident whether they want a new tree or not?
Historically, it's been productive for the city to work with the adjacent resident to basically adopt the tree. The adjacent resident waters the tree for the establishment period, which is 3 years, thereby taking some ownership in the health and longevity of that tree. That's what we've done historically. It's worked very well. It's not required of every site. However, we do make every attempt to work with the adjacent residents to establish one of those agreements. And in that process, we ask them, would they like a new tree? Here's a short list of species that we would recommend for this site. So we try to engage them in the process. I think moving into the future, we'll have to find some new ways to motivate people, because there has been some residents in South Palo Alto in particular that didn't want a new tree. They might have been building a house, and maybe they had a different set of values. They didn't want a tree there, and so there's now somewhat of a disparity, in part because some residents just didn't want a tree. I think we're going to have to find ways to provide different motivations.
So am I the exception or not the rule, or the rule? The fact that I wasn't asked whether I want a new tree or not.
Right, I think you're the exception.
Most of the time, we do get the residents do get asked whether they want a new tree or not.
Correct.
Now, when you have a boulevard, so you have a curb, then a planting area, and then the sidewalk, that's a natural area to plant the trees. What can you do where you have the sidewalk right next to the curb? Is there...
Most of the time, the right-of-way extends back a curb 10 feet. So we still have right-of-way that's in people's front yards where the sidewalk is directly adjacent to the curb, and those are sites that we actively plant and maintain trees.
One of the comments was talking about, could you have bulbs that stick out into the parking area and plant trees there? Is that something that the city is considering at all?
We have done that in unique cases. It's not standard practice. I think it's been done more where we had some historic trees. And if you look at the origin section, you'll see that some trees were actually planted out in the street. And so those bulbs to protect the tree were necessary. But then over time, as those trees naturally die off, the neighbors are wanting to still maintain a tree on that site, and so we've maintained curbing and that traffic control structure there.
Mm-hmm. But when you look at the tables, I forget what page that was on, that compares North Palo Alto to South Palo Alto. South Palo Alto has a lot less trees, and part of that I think is due to those sidewalks and the fact that you don't have this natural spot to plant street trees. Is there anything that you can do apart from trying to convince people to plant it in their front yard?
I think we are going to have to stretch ourselves a little bit on our capital improvement projects in the future, and we actually have started that with a project in Southgate, which is South Palo Alto, obviously. There was some drainage problems that needed to be corrected there. So doing that in conjunction with a rain garden concept, we have actually expanded the amount of soil space to grow trees in that neighborhood drainage project. And I think that may be one model that we employ in the future is to...
So you moved the curb, or how did you increase the area?
There's actually some soil that's being engineered underneath the street and sidewalk, so it increases the growing space for trees, and then making outlets into the planting strip provides more water and allows us to grow more trees in that space than was there before.
We were on the tour of the Mitchell Park Library, and they talked about that in the parking lot, having those trees and having that space in there, which seems like a very good idea. Is that become standard on street trees or standard in parks at all, or is that the exception?
I think it's going to be much more commonly used in the future.
And is it reasonably expensive, or is it?
I would say no, not in comparison to the benefits that we get, reduced maintenance and so forth. It's a practice that we can employ that's pretty cost effective.
Okay, on page 29, the table goes through. I'm not sure if you want to bring up the table at all. And this is one of the cases where I said, why is he showing me this? Because it's good information, but I'm not sure what the point is that you're showing in dollars, the various impacts that these various trees have. Mm-hmm. And then on the far right, the percentage of the population that those trees have. And are you trying to say which tree is better than the other? And let me let you.
So actually, this is the information section. So we're more trying to describe current state, but out of doing that, then you can start to draw some conclusions about if this is where we are currently, where do we want to get to? Is this what we want the population to look like long term? Mm-hmm. And I would say, Southern Magnolia representing 14% of the population all the way over to the right is probably more of that one species than we want.
Yeah, the far right column I found very interesting to see the distribution. The benefits I thought would have been more interesting if it had been normalized per tree as opposed to an overall population, because that would tell me.
I think that to look at that level of detail, it's better to look at the resource analysis, which is a companion document also posted on our website on the Urban Forest Master Plan page. So that's an additional 70 pages or so of much more detailed information than.
Oh, that compares each of the species?
Yes.
What is that called?
It's the resource analysis for street trees, and that's where this table was derived from.
Okay.
So actually, that does exactly what you're proposing, normalizes it per tree.
Okay, that would be very useful. And some of these benefits, it's hard to quantify them. You're doing a decent job. I mean, you can't be perfect with the quantification, but I thought it was interesting. There was one on native trees where you had a table and it listed the trees. I forget where that was. Do you remember which, lists all the different trees by, I think towards the end. Oh yeah, here we go, on page 50. Okay, and I was amazed how many of these trees are not native. And, you know, in the top 10 there, the only thing that's even close is the live oak. And how many of these trees are appropriate for the area? When you look at this distribution, are you happy with it, or do you see, you mentioned magnolia is not the best, liquid amber no longer is being planted. Of the other, you know, top 10 or top 20, are there a lot in there that aren't appropriate?
Well, obviously they're well adapted because they've been here for a long time. But I would say that, you know, if you look at the Palo Alto native species, we really need to emphasize those much more strongly. And you see the frequency in the street tree population. There's several, you know, zeros on that table of native trees, which I think we could employ. And then there's some trees like Modesto ash, which even though it only makes up 5% of the population, that's a tree that we're going to see much less of in the future because it has some structural problems that make it a very high maintenance tree. You know, out of that top 10 list there, yeah, you're right, only the coast live oak even makes top 10.
So these are the natives that are in this area, and with global warming, everything's warming up and you're shifting 10 miles a year, or what's the shifting of the weather?
Obviously, there's some disagreement in how quickly that's occurring, but we would expect that more of the oaks that naturally grow south of here would be adapted and do well in Palo Alto. So, you know, we're starting to look at oaks.
If you extrapolate,
you know, from
the environment, yeah.
Right.
So 200 miles south, it's mainly oaks? Or what type of trees are 200 miles south of here? Scrub oak?
there is, and you know, some of the trees that are on this list do occur much further south as well. The coast live oak goes very far south down the coast, as does valley oak.
Now, would those live oaks be slightly different than the live oaks here? Should we be sourcing live oaks that were from acorns 100 miles south of here? Would that give us better street trees?
No. You know, if we can get sources that are local, that's the seed that has adapted to this area. And trees will make changes with the climate. So, no, it still holds true that the more local you can get, the better off you are.
So if we come back and look at this table on page 50, do you think in 10 years it's going to be much different? Or do you think it's still going to be dominated by non-native plants?
So one of the things about the tree population is it's going to change very slowly. We don't make any real dramatic shifts, and trees are long-lived, so it's probably not going to look a whole lot different than what you see here. Our planting palette is going to look a lot different. So if you looked at trees that were 10 years old or less and looked at that percentage would look much different than this table. But the total numbers are not going to change a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned in here talking about some of the trees are dominated by large trees, which meant they were planted a long time ago, but not recently. And some other ones were dominated by the smaller trees, so they're more recent. A table like this that had the trees planted in the last 10 years, I would find very interesting. Okay, and I think I guess I have one more question. On page 79, we're talking about the salinity of the water, and the previous speaker mentioned this also. They said that a major part of it is that the pipes are cracked. This is as the sewage is going to the treatment center, it's getting salt water into the pipes?
Correct.
And I assume we can inspect those pipes with cameras and find out where there are cracks and where there aren't.
Yes, and my understanding is that there are some pipeline replacement projects that have already been funded and some in the works to correct a lot of the saltwater intrusion issues.
Okay. So do we think down the road that we'll be able to use recycled water without hesitation, or is this always going to have some certain species won't be able to tolerate the recycled water?
There's obviously different tolerance levels for species, and so I think it may be a source of experimentation to see how far we can go, both with salinity reduction and also with watering trees that may not be as tolerant, but doing that at a very young age where the trees are more adaptable, like we were talking about with the water quantity. Water quality, I think, can also be a characteristic they adapt to.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I learned a lot from those questions. Commissioner Markovich?
I had a question. Well, actually, to go back to something, is this working? Okay. There's tree planting trends. It's really hard to say. So you look at a lot of the magnolias are in North Palo Alto. And you have to remember that North Palo Alto was built out about 50 years before South Palo Alto. So they learned a lot and planted different types of trees in South Palo Alto. I'm happy to see the heritage trees listed here because one of them is in my mom's backyard of the 7 that are in the city. So that's really nice to see that tree because I got to climb that as a kid and now it's protected. So the neighbors can't cut it anymore. Do you have any more, how many heritage tree requests do you get annually? Or is it very, very sporadic?
We have not got a heritage tree request since I've been urban forester here. But just to expand on that a little bit, we also get very few requests to remove protected trees.
Thank you.
Others? Commissioner Cromie?
No.
Hi there. Thank you so much for all those questions. And some of those are my questions too. And I'm always amazed. Well, I live in South Palo Alto, and I'm always amazed at where I see the oak trees growing. They are very opportunistic. growing often in very strange places between the houses. I am lucky to have a few neighboring my property, halfway on, halfway off. I can't tell if they're all the way on. They seem to be shared between me and my neighbor. And so they look to me like they are volunteers. I can't imagine when I look at these trees why anyone would have planted them where they are. And so because we do have a shortage of these kinds of trees in our city, I'm wondering if anyone has studied where they are volunteering. I assume maybe it's near some underground water sources. I don't know for those, a lot of acorns are dropped. I feel like this year it's actually a bumper crop. I've never seen so many coming down, and some of those are going to germinate. So what can we do to encourage this kind of growth within the city?
So one of the goals, policies, and programs is to expand on the Oakwell survey that Canopy initiated, and that's a survey of our native oaks, because there is a lot of value in having those species present in a population size that is healthy, where we have diverse genetics, where we have enough volume of seed that we do have future crops of native seedlings being established. So we recognize that, and that is one of the goals, policies, and programs that we're hoping is going to be in the final version of the plan and be endorsed.
Is it in there now? Is it in what page is that on?
Goals, policies, and programs starts on 117. And I'm trying to find the exact reference to the Oakwell survey. It's Policy 1C, Conserve Native Trees, Program 1C, II, work with Canopy to update the Oakwell survey to assess changes in population of native oaks since 1997.
Okay, I now see why I couldn't find it in there. So this is a kind of thing that I'm interested in seeing, and so how are you prioritizing this list in the table here?
We will put some budget impacts on these different programs, and we will also put a year of implementation goals on them. That's not been done yet.
And how do you do that? What's the process? Do you meet with stakeholders, or who do you meet with to do that? Right. As an example, the Oakwell survey, since that was a Canopy-initiated process, obviously Canopy is going to be a very important stakeholder in determining when we can do that and how do we apply funding, how much is it going to take to expand that and repeat that survey on a recurring basis. Well, it's good that they're interested in that. And I see there's a survey, but then is built into that some kind of policy where you put resources toward helping these oak trees germinate. What kinds of programs do we have that look at that? So there's different programs outlined in this plan, but then I think more specifically it's going to be outlined in some of our site management plans. For instance, the individual park management plans that we put together for parks and open space, we will talk about how do we encourage natural regeneration, and then when we do get natural regeneration, how do we protect that so that those trees mature into, large established functional trees in the landscape. Yeah, that's how I think that's very pertinent and, really important. So is there any such program that would go on in neighborhoods? So I understand within the parks and the open space there would be that kind of monitoring of the germination and protecting and maybe temporary irrigation. is it a reasonable approach to look within neighborhoods, or is that just considered too complicated?
You know, I'm not sure how much we could encourage natural regeneration in neighborhoods because the landing space for seeds is pretty finite. However, when trees do naturally occur, we add them into our inventory, which means that the city commits to maintaining those trees over time.
Okay, that's good to know. Is there a place for anyone to go look to see a plan for their neighborhood? So I know in my own neighborhood, for instance, a lot of the trees seem to be coming toward maturity just by chance on my particular set of streets that I live near. And so does the city plan ahead for that and know that there's going to be death and then new planting required? Is there any kind of mapping that a neighborhood association can do to see that they're on radar?
We do have a 100% inventory of all of our street tree spaces and all of our park spaces in the developed parks. We do not have 100% inventory of our open space lands, but all of the trees within the developed portions of the city of Palo Alto are inventoried. So you can view that information, and in the near future, we're going to be making that information much more accessible through more open access to our inventory system. Currently, you can get on there and you can look at it, but it's a little bit cumbersome. So we're going to have a way to not only view the inventory, but be able to sort it, be able to utilize map features, and I think it'll be a lot more informative for people that want to get specific information.
That sounds really good. I have a general comment on the content here. I feel like there's a reasonable emphasis, of course, on sustainability and the use of trees for carbon sequestration, but I feel like there's not enough content in here on ecological benefits of trees, especially if this is going to be a document that influences other policies, because within our parks, we have when we're looking at tree plantings in parks, we want to also look and see if the park is on a wildlife corridor, that kind of thing. And so this document just doesn't have any of that emphasis to guide policy or any statements to say how important that is. So I only saw one shaded box on ecology that was written by, I think, someone from Actera, and it was very general. So I'd like to see a chapter on the significance of that to counterbalance, that would be from a conservationist point of view, to kind of counterbalance the sustainability point of view in this document, because both of those are incredibly important forces within our city's history, and we have a lot of good work that's been done within the city sort of through that conservationist thread, and I don't see that in the document at all. So I'm wondering if you can somehow put it in there.
Right. I think there is a little bit in different sections, but we'll certainly try to expand on that information.
Okay, I'm almost done here. How about on construction sites? Living in South Palo Alto, where there's so much construction going on, and as you know, every tree in South Palo Alto is pretty important because we don't have as many. I did notice on the current redevelopment of the Palo Alto golf course, there are two beautiful large oaks on that property, and they were fenced off, but one of them is dead now. And so it's just, it looks like whatever they did to try to protect it didn't work. So what kind of monitoring goes on, and how will we know that a new tree will replace the one that died?
I think our tree protection ordinance was precedent setting, and it's been tested a number of times. It's stood up, and for the most part, we have very good tree protection standards, and the outcome is that years after construction, we have healthy trees on those sites. Does it always work? No. And no matter how much monitoring you do or how careful city regulators are, there's always going to be a few cases where you don't get what you want or you don't get full compliance with all of the practices that are dictated for a construction project. So we certainly want to improve those standards. And also in the goals, policies, and programs, there is discussion about future improvements to the tree technical manual, which is our policy document guiding how we protect trees on construction sites. And let's see if I can find that real quick. Okay, it's policy 4G, program 4G 7. Update the tree technical manual, and it specifies a number of bullets on what improvements we are recommending to be made to that policy document.
So currently, when a tree dies that was protected, is there a protocol? Is it reported to someone?
If it was on public property, which would be a designated tree, then yes, we would know about that and we would replace the tree. If it's on private property and it was protected by ordinance, so a oak or a redwood above specified diameter, they have to go through a permitting process to remove the tree. We don't always require replacement on private property, but oftentimes we do.
Okay. So in this case, it's unclear. It's on a construction site. It was protected, so we don't quite know the outcome. There's not a clear pathway forward.
There could be. Usually we dictate in the conditions of approval what protection is supposed to be there for the tree, and if it happens to die during the construction process, then most of the time it would have to be replaced.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Others? Commissioner Hurley.
I learned a lot reading this report. I thought it was really informative and well organized and nicely presented. I do have some comments and questions in two particular areas that stood out to me quite a bit in the survey response, in the discussion of the survey responses. The first is the issue of tall broadleaf street trees. It seems that there is quite a bit of demand for that. For more, and yet the report also identifies a lot of reasons why those trees are difficult to place, particularly as street trees. However, that's exactly where we want them, right, is on the street where they're easy to clean up after, they're beautiful, they provide shade over the sidewalk, they give you a feeling of living in a really nice tree-lined neighborhood, all that good stuff. You get that from the street tree location more than you do from in somebody's backyard. Also, with the tiny backyards, there's not much room to get it away from the house and still have that kind of tree as part of our canopy for the long term. So I really hope that you won't just write them off because they're not drought tolerant and they're interfere with wires and all that kind of stuff, but rather look for suitable opportunities to put them in as much as possible.
Large trees produce large benefits, and percentage-wise, they're much more cost-effective than planting smaller trees. They produce that tunnel effect over the street, all kinds of health, safety benefits that large trees provide that we get much less from medium or smaller sized trees. So we are ready to confront the challenges of, conflicts with buildings and infrastructure. We are ready to confront the challenges with a very limited amount of soil space, with, the influence of utilities with traffic control. I mean, we have to consider all of these things, obviously, but I think we can find solutions to almost all of those obstacles and continue to have large growing street trees long into the future, hopefully forever.
That's great. I would also suggest that, as I know council is considering whether, or somebody's considering whether to move forward with undergrounding wires neighborhood by neighborhood, and maybe it's worth some integrated planning around that to try and target neighborhoods that have fewer of those large street trees for the beginning of the rollout, if there's community support for continuation of that project. Target those neighborhoods with a deficit of those tall broadleaf trees for undergrounding in order to start rebuilding the canopy. And I know South Palo Alto and Midtown are behind the curve in terms of that kind of variety of tree. The other area I wanted to talk about was there were many mentions of the disparity between the canopy in the North Palo Alto and South Palo Alto, and I really appreciated that the plan acknowledges that and quantifies it to the extent possible. And I liked seeing policy 1D1 that program 1D1 to investigate the reasons for less canopy in South Palo Alto, as well as to develop strategies to end the trend of decreasing canopy in that area. My question is, what was your thinking about strategies to increase the canopy in that area rather than just slow the decline?
Well, I think Keith was very insightful with, saying that he may have been an exception, but he didn't get an invitation, basically, to plant a tree in front of his house in South Palo Alto. And so I think we do need to expand our outreach to residents. We do need to have more innovative approaches to motivating people that may not have been too keen on planting a tree in front of their house to accept one and really embrace that in the future. And then also, in some cases, we need to be prepared to plant a tree even if the resident may not necessarily want to take care of it themselves. If they're just willing to tolerate it, maybe we need to think of a way to get a tree in there.
Yeah, I wonder why a resident would have a choice about that when nobody else had a choice about that. When you move in, you get the tree that's there, right? And the trees that are in the right-of-way, you call it a right-of-way because that's what it is.
Well, the system worked very well in the past, and I think that we've gotten to a point where we have currently about a 92.5% occupancy rate of all of our street tree spaces. Our goal in the plan is to achieve a 98% occupancy rate and maintain that. So we're going to have to be, a little bit better salespeople for trees and figure out ways to get them in there.
And my last question is, did you, given the concerns from South Palo Alto about this inequity, I wonder if you considered targeted outreach to educate them about the reasons why there may be, about what you learned about the difference in the canopy and the reasons you discover through your investigation, so that there's not only an understanding by the community about why we're there and what are opportunities to change it, but also so they get a sense that they've really been heard. They don't have to read the report to know that they've been heard. And I think that might be useful to consider.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Others? I just want to ask a quick question about, I understand that this is basically for the public areas, but the canopy is driven by a lot of people in their homes doing the right thing, both planting the right things as well as not taking down the wrong things. Is there a way that we can beef up both education to homeowners and then penalties if they're taking out things like redwoods and live oaks, which I had reported to me by a friend of mine that a house was scraped and all the trees with it. I mean, it's illegal. So I don't know what we could do relative to planning, the site plans and things like that, but that can obviously, impact the entire view of people walking on a street and the canopy benefits.
Yeah, certainly we address some of that concern in recommending revision of the tree technical manual and also recommending that City Council consider revising municipal code regarding trees. So there's two different sections of municipal code. 8.04 references city-owned trees. 8.10 references protection for privately owned trees. And that's where we could possibly enhance those protections, not only for oaks and redwoods, but for other trees that we consider important to our canopy, or locations that we consider important for the overall health of Palo Alto. So there's a couple of different mechanisms there, and I think the details have yet to be worked out, but if this plan is adopted in a similar form to what the draft is, then those actions would transpire as soon as we start to implement the plan.
Okay. Any others? Wow, lots of work in that. Thank you. Thanks for.
Might as well stay here.
Yeah. Talking about the golf course next.
Good job.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is an update on the golf course CIP, including draft EIR and reconfigurations and potential athletic center impacts, et cetera. So we do have an ad hoc that is created, and then Rob's also spearheading that, and obviously, yes, he should also remain at the table. So you want to start, Rob?
I'll kick us off on this one. So there's three areas actually that I sort of want to talk about today. One is the current situation of the golf course, what's happening now that we're stockpiling soil on site. The second is the timeline for the EIR. What's the next step? What can you expect to see? And then the third item, which is sort of probably the biggest issue or item, is the tree mitigation plan. There was a meeting recently. I think several commissioners went to the meeting, so I'm really keen to hear. Obviously talked to Walter, but keen to hear what the commissioners think about the progress of the tree mitigation plan. So there are the three things. So I'll jump back to the current situation at the golf course. We're started stockpiling soil out there, and we have a modified golf course. It's now par 67 instead of a par 72. It's a little shorter, but it's a really fun layout, and you can play your round of golf a little bit quicker. So we think that's good. We anticipated to see some drop in golf play because of that. If some people want to play the longer course, we thought it would be about a 20% drop in play, given our conversations and surveys of regular golfers before we started. After the first quarter of this fiscal year, we've experienced a greater drop than 20%, though. It's been more like 30 or 40%. So that has us pretty concerned for the next 6 to 8 months before we really shut down and begin to rebuild. So we're working hard with Brad Lazaris out there and Valley Crest Maintenance and the Bay Cafe to try and turn it around. What we think is happening in part is there sort of a message out there that we're closed. The golf course is under construction. And so we're trying to turn that around with some new messaging, and that's what you see up there, the Palo Alto Muni Bridge to the Future. We call it a bridge course, not a reconfigured course, but it's a bridge to the future, to try and re-message that the Palo Alto Muni golf course is still open. We have been doing quite a bit of discounting, but even that has not been sufficient. So we are going to go to council and ask for a little more flexibility in some discounting. The municipal code, or municipal fee schedule rather, allows us to discount up to 35% at the golf course. We increased that from 25%. in anticipation of this modified golf course. But still, it hasn't been enough. So we want to do a little more creative discounting, like kids play free on weekends as long as you have one paid adult, for example. A loyalty card, you play 5 times, you get 1 free. And you can get one, our idea is you get to play 1 free golf at the bridge course, or you get a certificate to play at the new course when it opens in 2015. So.
Is the loyalty card considered a discount?
Yeah, it is, because it looks like this. This is the idea, sort of a punch card, but the idea is that you give 1 free round of golf at the end of that. The municipal fee schedule allows us to discount 35%, doesn't allow us to give away a free round of golf. So we have to go back and get council approval for that. A few other ideas you see up here. We also, in the breezeway of the golf course, you're going to see some changes there, some big messaging about the timeline and the future of the new Baylands themed golf course, which will be exciting for people to see. Tournament play, I was going to show you another one. Well, this is another one we're going to ask council to approve, is to give away free rounds of golf to our non-profit partners that are doing good work in town. So we want to give away maybe 200 free certificates to play golf, and sort of as a thank you to the many non-profits. And what we think will happen there is that people don't generally come out and play on their own, right? They'll come out and grab a friend or a family member, and they're paying customers, and then we hope that'll increase overall revenue. So there's some of the things that we're doing right now. Hopefully we can turn it around and see a little more play out at the golf course. Certainly it's playing very well, and the temporary greens that we did build are playing very well, so we're excited about that. So that was the first thing. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the EIR and the construction timeline. So the next big thing we'll see happen, all the comments have been received for the EIR, the draft EIR, so the consultant, ICF, is responding to those as we speak. So we'll get the first draft of those responses, the staff will, by Monday, the 28th. We'll review those, and then they'll be made public early November. I think November 8th is the plan for that. Then we hope to bring the EIR, the full EIR, to the Parks and Rec Commission in December, and to the Planning and Transportation Commission in December, and then to the full City Council early January, as early as possible. We think that'll be January 20th. Still a very ambitious timeline, because then we would need to put bid packages together, provided we get approval from council to go with the project, and award a contract in April to begin construction. So that's the timeline. That's what you'll see with the EIR. And the third thing we wanted to talk about is the tree mitigation plan and how that's going. And maybe, Walter, do you want to kick us off with that and just talk a little bit about where you're at, and then we can hear from the commissioners?
Sure. We had a very productive follow-up meeting with our constituent group, and we were able to have some commissioners attend that. What we were able to achieve is to understand the approach to calculating the mitigation, because we're not going to exclusively plant trees for removing trees, so we needed to establish an equivalency mechanism, a ratio of how many trees equals how much grass and native plants, so that we're doing Baylands appropriate restoration projects with the mitigation funding that has to be conveyed because of tree removals. So we have an approach to calculate the ecosystem values of those trees, and there's also available models to calculate ecosystem benefits for other native plant restoration projects. So that brings us down to a common denominator where we can boil down to dollars ecosystem value of the current trees versus ecosystem value of the proposed landscape, which includes trees plus grass and native brush.
And are those standard calculations, or are there established rules for doing that?
There are scientific models that are peer-reviewed that have been utilized in a number of different cities, including cities in the Bay Area. So we have those available to us, and we're going to do the best job we can to establish equivalency, and realizing that you can't monetize every value. So there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect, but I think this is probably the best possible approach to accomplish the goals of our constituents, and not do tree for tree replacement, or our standard protocol is actually 2 to 6 for 1 replacement ratio on trees, and that obviously would not be appropriate in the Baylands. And we've heard from our constituents that they don't want us planting trees all over town just to satisfy mitigation requirements. So the project's happening in the Baylands. What we've heard is our constituents want the mitigation applied back in the Baylands to the largest extent possible, and that's why we're employing a somewhat different approach. This is actually a new model for us that we have not utilized before, but we think we're being very responsive to all of our constituents, and I hope the park commissioners that attended the meeting will echo that sentiment. And then the second part is that during the meeting we prioritized where we thought the sites that would have this mitigation employed would be. And number one, obviously, is on-site at the golf course. So we're going to do as much as we can on-site. And then our second tier was any Bayland site, and we identified some potential landing places for restoration projects within the Baylands. Bixby Park has a small amount of acreage that we could put trees and landscaping, site-appropriate species into. The buffer mound surrounding Bixby is another location. And then there's a number of other Baylands locations that were identified in conjunction with our open space team that we thought would be appropriate for restoration. And then our third tier, our default, if we can't fully satisfy mitigation in the golf course, Tier 1, and Baylands locations, Tier 2, would be off-site. So we're keeping the Arastradero Preserve, discrete areas where trees naturally occurred as a fallback if we need to employ that mitigation option. And we're also, keeping other park sites and street tree sites that are currently vacant where we could plant trees as a third tier. Fourth tier.
In the third tier with Arastradero.
Anyway, so on-site, near-site, and then off-site as our 3 tiers. I think it'd be appropriate to hear from the commissioners that attended.
Okay, well, all 3 of us that are on the ad hoc committee were attendees at the meeting after we finally got through the gates out there. It was exciting. And it was very, very constructive, very well attended by broad constituents, and very well organized and chaired by Walter. But very, very constructive. And this map that you're seeing is just kind of a first initial draft from Peter Jensen as to possible Baylands mitigation sites. And he was here for the first part, but now he's gone. So, and then there was discussion about Bixby, what we can do to that moonscape out there within the context of regulations, which I wasn't even aware how severe they are, from the, what organization is that? Who's in charge of the landfill? Yeah, it's still land. It's basically still considered landfill and will be for lots of years. So there's, that's lots. So there's, right. No, just, you weren't here when I introduced you, so now you can wave. Now you can wave. I was showing off your great work here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of restrictions in terms of what can be done on top of Bixby, unfortunately. So you guys should chime in.
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments. It was a really good meeting, very productive, good variety of speakers. I think he was there. You're missing the native plants person, but I think people could speak.
Yeah, they were invited, and they'll still have opportunity for input.
So, a couple of interesting things came up out of the meeting. First of all, I don't know if it was mentioned, but we're hiring a consultant out of the golf course. So this company, whoever they are,
Urban Ecos.
So Urban Ecos has been tasked with determining the net decrease of trees on the golf course, factoring in the reestablishment of some interesting, useful habitat there. And so they're trying to look at this equation, and it's basically going to determine what we are owed in the tree mitigation. So that's something new. I don't know if our commission was aware of that company being hired, the consulting company. So I think they're doing inventories now, I think. And so they are going to come up with a value for the mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea what that's going to be. And then the other huge unknown is there's no money for the tree mitigation at all, as far as I understand. So I was hoping we could talk about that a little bit, if that's standard practice. And there's the conversation got a little bit complex about the Joint Powers Authority. There's several levels of mitigation. I don't know if it's worthwhile getting into those details, but I would like to know, just in general, why we don't have any money behind this.
There will be money for mitigation, but it is not currently budgeted. So, yeah, it is a little bit of an unknown as exactly how much funding will need to be applied. And there's an established budget for the golf course. There's also an established budget for the levee project. Out of those established budgets, you're going to have to take money from certain categories to fund whatever the required mitigation is. And so it's not that there's not budget, but it's going to be budget taken away from some other area.
I'll just add that it could be that the budget has to increase a little bit. I mean, the budget for the golf course project is at about $8 million right now. And as the EIR gets developed and we learn more about what needs to be mitigated, like the tree mitigation, we understand and learn more about what that's going to cost. And so that's going to change the budget. And so as far as the big picture of the budget, it's paid for in two ways for the golf course reconfiguration. It's in part by the flood control and their impact to the city, and we think that's going to be around $3 million around there. And then the remainder will be paid by really by the golfers that pay it back over a 20-year loan, which will be a revenue bond, and that will include the construction costs and I would suspect any mitigation that's required that we've learned about from the EIR process.
When do you think we'll get that report from the consultant doing that inventory check?
It's due the first part of December. We're hoping to convey a sense of urgency and receive that report earlier.
Right. I mean, our hope, and we are on a tight timeline, and we have been for a while now. And now that we've begun and we've altered the golf course, we really feel some pressure to begin work next year. So we hope to bring the EIR to the commission in December, that it's be rather complete, including the tree mitigation plan, so that this commission can feel comfortable recommending support of it to the full city council. And we would like the same thing from the Planning Commission. So, you know, we're pushing pretty hard to get that ready, and we're going to, hopefully this company, I forget the name of it, will have their information in prior to the beginning of December, so we have sufficient time to include it in the report to the Parks and Rec Commission.
Okay. Any other comments on the committee or the tree mitigation? I just want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I know it came up at the meeting, but I forgot. So what are our next steps as a committee? When do you think we would meet again as a group?
I think as soon as we have some draft content on the ecosystem calculations, it would be an opportune time to meet. I don't think we have to have a final product from our consultant. I mean, at least that way we're starting to look at it from the perspective of how many projects can we select and how extensive is our scope of work.
I was just going to give you one quantitative item, which I didn't know, and that is that when you do this replacement, as I understand it, you try to get back to where you were within a 10-year period. So it doesn't mean like day one you plant the equivalent of the canopy that you had. It can go out over 10 years. So there will be something less than what's there for 10 years, unless you raise even more money and put even more. So that's the kind of rule for canopy replacement, right? And then I just wanted to circle back to the first thing that you brought up, Rob, and just say I really think it's great that you're being both creative and aggressive on that issue of trying to generate some revenue. The thing that we have to keep in mind here is that basically that golf course is a fixed cost. So the variable cost of having somebody play a free round, particularly if it's after they already bought 3, I mean, this is a no-brainer. Yep. This shouldn't take a lot of debate and spend a lot of time on that one. I mean, anything you can do to get revenue going, and you're doing it in the right way, which is to bring in somebody that's paying for some reason, either because they want to play 4 times and they only have to pay for 3, which I don't even think is a discount, actually. I think that's a free round. It's like, you know, you get a free night in a hotel room, the variable cost is the washing your sheets. Otherwise, it's fixed, and that's not really a discount. But anyway, I think just congratulate you on that. And also, I just want to mention that I had mentioned to Rob that it was looking a little bit shabby out there. I mean, there's paint peeling off and stuff like that, and Rob said that's crazy. And they're now painting it. It looks a lot better, jumped right on it. So, you know, appreciate the responsiveness there in the same vein of, you know, we're getting people to come out there and look at it. So let's make sure that paint isn't falling on their head as they're heading for, old paint as they're going to the first tee. So it's going to look a lot better. Thank you.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest complaints we get is the geese, the mess that they make. And so we had dogs coming out, dog circles coming out 3 times a week. They're out there 5 days a week now. So you see quite a bit of difference.
You should advertise that. There are no geese. That'll take people away from shoreline. Okay, great. Thanks, Walter. Long evening for you.
I'm going to send a big thanks to Walter too. I think he's done an outstanding job in reaching out to a whole variety of people and really listening and taking the time to reconsider, you know, our plans based on the feedback. So it's a great job.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda, I don't know why we're getting this ringing that we didn't have in the past 2 hours. Sorry? I know.
The volume is really loud.
Oh.
Time to end the meeting.
So the next item is to prepare in a preliminary way for the City Council study session, which we do annually. There's an important new dimension this year for people that have lived through this for years and years, and that is that our chair and vice chair are to meet with the mayor and the vice mayor in advance to have a dialogue about what might be appropriate and helpful to be presented. So that's good. We can have sort of a private, off the record, and discuss some things. So I just had a couple of suggestions to kind of kick off the discussion from our perspective, which now, as I've stated, is going to be infused with input from the mayor and vice mayor. Vice Chair Headley and I went over some of this stuff. And again, it's just for discussion purposes, but I always think it's helpful in the years that I've been involved to just have a handout of things, not unlike what we did prior to our retreat, where we just said, here kind of highlight items that we've done in the last year. And, you know, we can do more 2013 things or rolling 12 months, but that's just as a handout, as a reminder for what we've been doing. But one thought I had was to suggest some bigger issues where we might want direction in advance if the commission wants to take on these issues. And a couple of examples are the Baylands athletic fields. You know those Bayland athletic fields that the council talks about all the time?
The current ones or the ghost ones?
The ghost ones, right, the ghost ones. And the reason I bring that one up, which is, you know, controversial, is if that's already been decided, although there's not been a council vote, that's fine. And then we don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time on that. But I know a lot of commissioners feel like we should spend a lot of time on that, maybe coupled with the strategic plan to figure out what amount of fields or gyms or open space or bocce ball courts or whatever else it is that we really need before there's an automatic reaction that we need fields. And even if it turns out that we need fields, do we need 5 because they 5 fit? Or do we need 1 in a gym? Or do we need 1 now and keep it open and then figure out later as things grow? So that's a kind of example that I think would be helpful for, I guess, first for us to talk with the mayor and the vice mayor about, and then maybe with the council to get their overall direction. Another one that I've been thinking about and talking with our vice chair about is, you know, dog parks just keep coming up and coming up and coming up. And the biggest constraint, well, there's also, we're on record, and so is council, that in new parks, we want to look for space for more dog space. And we've done that unsuccessfully, including El Camino, where we thought we finally had, you know, a compromise, but at least it was going to be a dog park, and then it was nixed by the EIR. So we could take on something a little bit more controversial, which is to say that there isn't any extra space. So should we be taking a look at shared use dog spaces? You know, pick an example that would reflect on my past life in Babe Ruth. You know, you could take the outfield of Baylands 3 mornings a week, and that could be a dog run. There's a whole. Sorry.
The athletic center.
What did I say?
You just said Baylands.
Oh yeah, no, the athletic center, the baseball diamond. Just pick that because it would be controversial, and there'd be a lot of stuff that has to be done relative to volunteers and watching the dogs and cleaning up and getting ready for the kids to play and so on. But if that's a way to look at this problem differently, then maybe that's something that we could try to tackle, if you chose to. But even if we chose to, I think it might be helpful to get directional guidance from council to say, is there enough interest even for having us spend our time on that, or is it, no, they've already been through that in their minds or in their votes or in their kind of private deliberations that, you know, that's just not something that's going to fly. So that's more the kind of thing that I was thinking that we could put in front of council for discussion. So do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
We don't want to invest a lot of time on on new research analysis proposals if they're dead in the water to start with. So it does seem worthwhile to think of things we might want to have for that degree level of consideration, and to have them on the list to put before council to give us some feedback whether that's the wrong direction, the right direction.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you speak to the mayor and vice mayor, are they allowed to tell you what is dead in the water? It's only 2 of them out of the entire council. So those, what if they're the biggest proponents of one of these questions that we're asking?
Yeah, they aren't, but I think they would give us guidance of saying, you know, that might be something that we're really receptive to. That's going to get a mixed response. That one looks like, you know, wow, we should take a look at that, and they'll add guidance to the structure to do that. But no, I don't think they have any veto power on that for the 2 of them.
Because if these, the two things that you brought up, you know, I think are great items. I mean, the idea of shared use. I mean, I've been on the commission, I've lost track, maybe pushing my 5th year or 6th year. And one of the first things we did when I came on was form a committee to look at the need for
Dog
dog
parks.
parks. And one of our primary ideas was shared use. That, you know, 5 years ago, and it just, for some reason, it just didn't fly because we went the other direction of going toward, well, let's just say, let's try to leverage developing a new dog park with every park renovation, and it just hasn't worked, and so I think we're going back to that, but I think.
So you're saying that's a good issue that we could put on the table?
I think we should, I think your strategy is okay to vet with them, but I think we should also just internally decide what we think the really important issues are.
To take to the council study session? Okay. The other one that is timely based on our last ad hoc committee and your report is that Baylands Golf Course clubhouse. You know, it looks a lot better that it's painted, but it's still the same architecture. The parking lot is full of holes and floods. There's not a single, speaking of trees, there's not a single tree in the parking lot, which would actually be fairly easy to do. I think we got a number of, like, a wild estimate of about $2 million to get that all refurbished, which doesn't sound like a big amount of money if we're putting $1 million into shrubs at the water treatment plant. And it's not a bond anyway, so I mean, that's controversial, but maybe we could get some private funding for that. So if there was, you know, receptivity here or on the council to take a look at that, that would be another one of those things that would be kind of a bigger issue that we could get behind. Commissioner Markovich.
You put trees in that parking lot, that goes a long way towards mitigation.
Helps?
Yeah. A lot of trees in that parking lot.
Yeah. Covers up the car, makes it look good.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, we're creating this phenomenal golf course, and you still got to get through that parking lot to get up there to drop your bag and go pay your fees. Keith, did you have something?
No.
Oh,
Just chatting.
just chatting?
About Mitchell Park Library doing having the trees and then the gravel
Uh-huh.
after, to make it easier on the roads. Yeah, same good.
Okay, so other comments on these suggestions or other suggestions? And also, is this the type of thing that you would like to bring to the council study session? We actually literally don't have to decide tonight. This is just kind of organizational, taking a look forward. We have a chance to do it at the meeting on November 19th. And by the way, our meeting with the mayors on the 18th. So,
Can
Yeah,
I ask
Abby?
you a question?
Sure.
Since I've never been part of this before.
sure.
So structurally, what has it looked like, which is in the past, so I can kind of put some.
Okay, yeah, a little bit varied, and it's generally been left up to us. Sometime, at one point, other people can join in who've been on longer. At one point, we picked 3 issues that we thought were particularly topical and just gave a quick status report, because it's really short. It's only an hour for everything to happen. Or maybe it was just 2 issues. Was it 2 issues? 3 issues. So that was an example. Another point, our liaison said, we just want to hear about new items. So we talked about various things like, you know, we're going to work on an app maybe for Parks and App or Parks and Recs or things like that. So that was kind of they wanted to focus on the new stuff. So it can vary.
And it usually does include kind of a quick and dirty summary of the big issues we've been working on in the past year and the big issues we see on the horizon, if to the extent there are any. And then council also, often I think every member has something to say about what they're thinking about, what we've done or what we should do, or,
So you get 9 opinions.
yeah.
It makes it easy to act on that.
Sounds like Thanksgiving.
Did you have something, Deirdre?
How do you think it would work best for council to speak to us? Because it does always seem like it is very broad, what we hear. It's always very fascinating to hear what's on the top of everyone's mind. I've always really enjoyed it, but I sometimes feel like it just gets lost. So is there a way that we can organize council a little bit? I guess that will be coming out of the meeting between our chair and vice chair as well. Is that part of the meeting that you want to have them be able to organize themselves as they speak to us? Or are we just going to
I'm not
leave
sure.
that?
I'm not sure I'd go that far. But
It's going to leave it we're going to leave it very free form. It's usually been very free form, but I don't feel like we do a lot with the comments.
so, and I was going to ask you, as our current liaison, if you had guidance on this issue.
Yeah, just having gone through many boards and commission meetings, there are constraints, and one, every council member likes to say, here's my concern or issue or something with the commission. So that takes 9 members. It's a good opportunity for the council to get to know you. So it would be, nice to hear from each of you. But if you put the 9 and the 7 together, 2 minutes each, it takes up a lot of the 60 minutes. So yeah, and there is a further constraint, is this is not an action-oriented item, so the council can't vote on anything. So you hear individual opinions. You don't say, 4 council members approve this or that. So within that context, I think your idea of organizing, if you want to get some feedback, it's good to ask the council very specifically a couple questions. And then at least you get them focusing on those questions and you can get a sense that way. But you're not likely to get a yes/no vote from them. But look at it, I guess, as an investment in the next year as you come before the council with your recommendations a number of times. And the more, the better they know you. Gee, that's a good group with thoughtful ideas. The more impact you have over the course of the year. So, one of your goals ought to be, how can you get each one of you to participate and become a personality in that time frame.
Any other comments on the suggestions or more suggestions? And again, you have 30 days to add to this. So.
I think that idea of having council members comment on a particular topic is somewhat new. I don't know if we've been that organized about it, where everyone usually people just bring up their own independent idea. Have we organized around topics that the council speaks on?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I think I was talking about El Camino Park, and we got.
You and I did the bike plan.
Right, and we got some feedback that indicated, I wouldn't say all 7 members, but that more than one member said you may need to rethink El Camino Park because of some other stuff that's going on. So.
That's jogging my memory. I think that was very productive.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, they also tag team, because they all can't comment on every single thing we talked about. So I think they take turns making comments, but we certainly can't tell them how they're going to structure their time. I don't think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so should we leave it there for, did you have something to say?
No.
Oh. Should we leave it there for now, and then we'll pick it up after the meeting with the mayor on our next meeting, which is the 19th. Our next meeting is on the 19th.
The next day.
Next day, right. It'll be fresh.
One thought I had, just as you in another topic, maybe a little controversial, but might be something that I know the Commission cares a lot about is Cubberley and the future of Cubberley. And the council had a closed session last night, further discuss with the city manager about negotiating that lease. And I know the council's interested in providing some public comment at some point, and December 2nd might be a good time to, for that. I don't know, but maybe bring it up with the mayor and vice mayor and see if that's an interest.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move on to ad hoc. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I said I didn't have anything to say.
Yes, you
but
did.
It would be great if between now and our next meeting, everybody gave some thought to whether this is the right list, or if there's new things, other things we should add to the list, or if things we should take off the list. Be great to hear your thinking about that.
In the
At the next
spirit of the Brown Act, send it all through, Rob.
Or just come prepared to talk about it
On the
next
19th.
month.
True, but if you wanted to.
Either way.
time,
Yeah,
gotta
that'd be
do
great.
both.
That'd be great.
Okay, so existing ad hocs that have reports, I think the Scott Park does.
You want to talk to it, or take your pick?
Sure. We, Keith and I met with Darren recently,
A couple weeks ago.
couple weeks ago, about the Scott Park bocce ball dilemma. And Darren is going to set up another outreach meeting. I think we all agreed that that loop needed to be closed. So there will only be one meeting, but he's going to go to great lengths to make sure everyone who could possibly care about it knows about it and knows to send a friend if they can't make it. I believe he's going to present a draft design with and without the bocce court. And
One of the issues was whether we have one meeting or two meetings.
yeah.
He was worried on one hand that if you have one meeting, if people aren't available, they miss the meeting. But we didn't want to fragment it anymore. We thought it'd be better to have one meeting, publicize it well in advance, and if people can't make it, they can send representatives or send letters.
And then to try to move forward quickly.
Yeah.
Well, that'll come back to, wow, something did happen to this mic. That'll come back to the commission, right?
Yes.
Darryl will bring that back to the commission, which would be a second time for the public to comment if they missed the one meeting.
Right.
So they get a second shot there. Is there going to be any discussion, pricing, et cetera, on why is it there as opposed to down the park at Heritage, which seemed like a logical alternative? It's a block away.
I don't think, we weren't talking about Heritage Park at all. One thing that we did want to do was just not present a plan for, this is the bocce court plan, thumbs up, thumbs down. What we wanted to say is, well, if we didn't do the bocce, this is what we would do. And so they have two choices, as opposed to having some nebulous other choice when they say they don't want the bocce court. Because maybe they'll look over in the other plans and think that that's, even though, even the bocce supporters might say, oh, that's even a better design, or vice versa.
Yeah, there was a discussion about basketball hoops and
Yeah,
picnic tables and.
These building into the plan to be presented will include a recommended location for a for moving the picnic tables as well.
And the plan is to move the picnic tables down on that grassy area that's more visible from the street. That would be more useful and also easier security.
Okay. Any other existing ad hocs?
I'm not an ad hoc, but I'm a liaison on the Mitchell Park Steering Committee, and I had the tour too, which was fantastic, and they're doing a lot of art installation now, so it's really starting to look fantastic, it's looking like it's really coming together. They don't have a specific date yet with regard to the grand opening. It is going to be tiered, where in order to reach the different constituencies that will be using the team facility as well as the library, it's going to be a 5-week rollout. Instead of one big giant grand opening, which we will do, it's also 1 week it'll reach kids or teens. They haven't established exactly. 1 week might be for seniors, et cetera. So we bring everybody in the community in to say, wow, this is really great and fantastic, and this is how you can use this facility. We have a few designs for the grand opening invitation, and we're looking quite well.
We picked one actually now.
You did pick it?
I got it in front of Jim Kane to do the
Is it
final. Yeah.
Good.
Tree.
It's really going to be spectacular once
get there.
Once it's there.
That's the biggest challenge. We don't have a firm date, but we're pushing hard. And big kudos to Phil Bobel from Public Works, who's out there on site all the time, cracking the whip, and he's got a good way about him. He's making it happen.
Once the library moves back to the new library, will he have to refurb the old library before he can rent it out, or will it be minimal work?
They will need to refurbish the auditorium. It's fairly minimal, though. I mean, they take all the book racks out. They'll have to redo the floors, some painting work, and the technical services is in the area that used to be the large kitchen back there. So that'll need some work. There'll be a new catering kitchen put back in there.
Do you know how much time would be before you can start renting it out again?
The temporary library is likely to be in there through the end of January before they're really fully out, and then rework for 3 months probably. Might be early summer before we're renting the space again.
Okay. Then also as part of the ad hocs, I've got a very constructive note from Greg Betts saying that he's heard repeatedly from us that we would like to have more input and earlier on the CIPs relative to Parks and Recs, and we have done that, and he has heard. I got involved relatively late last year as kind of a one-person ad hoc, and I think it was obvious that it was too late. So I really appreciate Greg, sort of reaching out proactively. And we kicked around a couple of options, and I'm not going to go into it tonight, but what you have in front of you is a couple of sheets that Rob can explain in a sec on the basics of getting going on CIP prioritization. But bottom line is, I think Greg and I felt that a couple-person, could be more, but a couple-person ad hoc committee should get going here to begin reviewing projects and kind of vetting ideas from other commissioners and the public. Because I think that would give us, again, sort of some close time looking at all this in detail as I did. And then the prior year, Jennifer and I did that. And that was helpful as well, but then it kind of went down a little bit from there. So quite constructive. And the idea is to go through these each year. And I think you heard at the last presentation how it's prioritized within department, and then it's prioritized, sort of more globally across the city, and eventually council votes on that. Do you want to explain, Rob, what the docs are?
So yeah, I can. Does everyone have the two sheets? There's a smaller one. Yeah, there's a little bit of an eye exam, but starting with the one that says sources and uses of fund statement. Really, this spreadsheet talks about what money we have to use and where it comes from for the CIPs for the 5-year program. We have a 5-year plan, but we only fund 1 year at a time. And then, each year we add another year. So this next CIP period, we're going to be adding 2019, which will be sort of new CIPs. But looking at this spreadsheet, you see the sources of funds, the beginning reserve that comes over from last year. Then there's a transfer of funds from the general fund, 2.5%. You see that 14 million there. And then there's a variety of reimbursements that come in from grants and other taxes and so on. You see the money from the JPA that we hope to get, $3 million for the golf course in there, 2014. And then you see a total number, 46 million, that's available for CIPs. And we have the cost of CIPs and the salaries related to those, and then infrastructure reserve balance ending 12,208,000. You see that, and then if you go to 2015, you see that begins again with the balance, 12,208, and we start over. So this sheet really just represents the cash that we're working with to build CIPs. The second spreadsheet, the one that's...
Some of these sources are constrained, aren't they? Or are we free to spend
some of them are very much tied to a specific project. They're not open for any project, that's right.
And this is citywide, or?
This is citywide, general fund, not enterprise fund. There's lots of CIPs that are in the enterprise fund as well. So the second sheet is
the really first initial pass at the next 5 years. And so you see 2019 is being added here. So I don't know how the best way to explain this. You see see column AA there? You can see that. That was the approved 2015 budget in the 5-year plan. Then the shaded area is the new 5-year plan, is how I understand it. And the next column that also shows 2015, which shows the change, from the initial 2015 plan to the new 2015 plan. You only see one change there. It's $85,000 for marking and striping, I should say.
But it shouldn't.
We just received this too, so I'm still.
I'm confused. Isn't AC, the column AC, isn't that the difference between AA and AD?
Yes, that's.
So
I believe that's what I said. But
75K to 75K, should that be a delta of 0?
yes, I'm confused about that too. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that myself. But so what we plan to do is come back in November and have a deeper discussion and deeper dive into these numbers. Like I said, this is new, sort of new to me as well, so I'm trying to catch up. This is largely been work with Darren Anderson and Greg Betts, so I apologize for not fully understanding the sheets in front of us. But
I think that just might be a typo.
it could be, yeah. But the way it was explained to me is that the gray columns are the essentially the new 5-year plan, and we're adding sort of another year, because it's always 5 years, so we're adding 2019, which is the area where we will focus most on in terms of what projects will, will get added. The projects that are, within the 4 years prior have been on the list for some time, for some reason, because of a need to replace. That's not to say you can't move things around. It's possible, or new needs come up that trump, what exists here. But generally, it stays mostly the same because of just the need to replace.
Refresh my memory. What happens to a CIP budget that isn't used in a particular year? Can you roll that to the next year, or does it disappear?
You can roll it to the next year.
Okay.
Yeah, you can move them around years to years. And
okay, so there's no mad dash to spend it before December 31st.
No, but there is always the other needs that come up, and if it hasn't been spent, then there's always that question of, okay, well, it hasn't been spent. This may be a way to move it.
But some of our input might be exactly that,
yeah.
Which is let's push this out for 3 years because we could use that $400,000 on X instead of what it's budgeted for, and
right.
We'll worry about that in 3 years.
Yep. So this is more, as soon as we received this information, this came from the Office of Management and Budget. These spreadsheets, we wanted to make sure that the Commission got it as early as possible as well. And like I said, we hope to talk about it in greater depth in November, but you have it now. So as you go home and read it and you find questions about it, you can call me, and if I know the answer, I'll help. If I don't, I'll get it before our meeting in November.
But in the interim, we could have this ad hoc working with Greg and Darren and looking at the prioritization. So I think that's what Greg and I were thinking about. So I would just suggest a couple of folks, and I think it would be helpful to have one of our newer commissioners on this as a new view of it. So that leaves one of the two new commissioners. And so I was just thinking that Scott Park might be over pretty quickly, so you might have more bandwidth than you do relative to the tree mitigation and stuff. So
I'd be interested.
Sure, go for it.
And I'd be happy to stay on it, since that would provide some continuity. Any other? Done, she says. Any other hands?
That can be a backup.
Our infrastructure specialist. But do you want to get on, or do you want to be a backup?
Backup.
Okay. So if that works, then we should just authorize that, and we'll probably be pretty busy in the next 3 weeks getting ready for the November 19th.
So
Okay.
then this will be on the agenda for us for next month?
That was the plan, yeah.
Great.
That's the plan, and if the timetable doesn't change and we make some progress, I think that's what we go with. Any other ad hocs, old or new? Oops, where's that thing? Okay, so then the next is comments and announcements. Piece of paper.
I have just a couple.
Go ahead, Rob.
Begin. I talked to Peter Jensen about the Parks and Rec master plan and when that's anticipated to be in front of council for approval of the contract, so we can really get going on the project. Looks like it's going to be towards the end of November before it goes to council, and he doesn't think that we'll begin work in earnest until after the new year for the Parks and Rec master plan. So pushed out a little bit from what we had thought, but I think that'll be okay.
Can you say where we are in that phase? So are you writing up a contract right now?
Writing up the contract and the terms of the contract with the consultant that we selected. It was unanimous, so you know who it is. So that's taking a little bit of time, back and forth on that. We're not quite there, close. And then putting a staff report together for the city council, and then then we get into December pretty quickly. So, and then as you know, the first part of the work is really outreach to the customer base and the park users, and over the middle of December, you start to lose people. So I really think it'll be January before we really get going. There's a Brown Act training. You all seen that on tomorrow at 6, so let's be sure everyone knew about that. And there's a Boards and Commission recognition event on November 7th at 7 p.m. at Lucy Stern Center. And I'm not sure if the clerk's office sent anything out to anyone about that yet. Did they? Okay, so you saw that, all right. So that would be, if you can make it, that would be wonderful to see you there.
Stanford football.
All right.
7 p.m., same time.
Biggest game of the year. Not missing that.
Where do they play?
Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
I have tickets too. I'm like, okay, can I be at both?
No, take football.
That was it for me.
Speaking of Stanford football, I missed the meeting at Monroe Park because it was right during the Stanford game. Do you attend?
I was there, yes. So I wanted to thank Peter Jensen for doing a really good job helping to inform our neighborhood about the meeting, because last time there were people who didn't receive didn't receive the postcards. So everyone got things twice this time, which was good. And so the attendance was good. We had the meeting on just a Saturday, 3 p.m. in the park, and there was good attendance and good discussion, a nice set of plans. So, I think people in the neighborhood are very excited about things. Great. And there's some consensus building to be done. One of the biggest decisions is just what do we put in the park for kids to play on. And so the two choices that were presented to us were a swing set that accommodated big kids, which is what we used to have in that park and everyone really misses, and then versus a play structure that would be for kids 2 to 5. So it's going to be pitting the broader age against the little kids. And everyone in the meeting had older kids, and so there's a huge show of hands for the swing set. So it was really fun process, and I think the next thing that happens is that we get a list back with all the comments, and I guess at some point there might be some follow-up to make the final decisions there, but it was really good.
How many people were at the meeting?
About 20 or so. Yeah. Could have even been more.
And I heard from Peter that you actually helped with the outreach, and you actually walked the streets and put, nice job.
Yes, I took my dog and we left a postcard.
Yeah, that was
and
great.
out, and it was
Thank you
a
for
great
doing that.
experience.
Yeah, we got to be careful about scheduling these things during Stanford games. That's really depresses attendance. Any other? Go ahead.
I had a couple go-backs from previous meetings. Rink and Audit Plan.
It was intended to come back this evening.
Right night, yeah.
Yeah, but at the last hour, it just wasn't ready. There were still some questions about some of the cost elements that were in the staff report. So it was pulled at the last minute, so it'll come back in November.
Next month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Magical Bridge, I haven't heard anything about that recently. Is there any new news on that?
I don't have any new information on that, but let me see what I can find out, and I can email the commission.
Okay. And how about El Camino Park? Any news on that?
Council, yeah.
Well, we're going back to the plan that the commission approved, and so we're moving forward. That's good news.
And they're actually actively constructing it, or is it still?
It's still 2 years away before it will be reopened, is my understanding.
Oh, wow.
And it's partly, my understanding is partly utilities work that's still happening with the pump station, mostly that. But that's the timeline that I heard, that it's 2 years.
Ugh.
I know,
That's way behind the original estimate.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we could have sat here and mulled it over for another year.
No.
Okay. And that's it. Thank you.
I had one.
Yeah, Deirdre?
There is a new dog park that's been built. It's on the border of Mountain View, Palo Alto. It's at San Antonio and Fayette, at the new redevelopment of the old Sears shopping center on the corner of San Antonio.
Wait, it's in the shopping center?
No, it's a redevelopment of a shopping center which now is housing a supermarket and some open space.
Oh, okay.
And so the grand opening for the dog park was on Saturday night after the Monroe Park meeting. And it's really interesting. I encourage everyone to go over there and check it out. It has artificial turf, and it has sculptures inside of the dog park. It's fenced, and it's sort of a boutique dog park.
How big is it?
It's not very big. I don't know square footage wise. It's not very big, and it's an interesting design because it has sort of a non-dog park adjacent to a dog park. So each get equal space for the humans and the dogs each have their own domain. The one thing is that it's beautifully landscaped all around, so it's really emphasizing the dog park as a meeting place, such that you can sit on pretty furniture when you're in there with your dogs. And so it's really boutique and not exactly how we would do it in Palo Alto.
Wine bar?
Wine bar.
Wine bar. You know what? There could be somebody sets up a wine bar when you go.
Organic dog treats.
Yeah, but again, it's Mountain View is doing interesting things with small amount of space because it's very close to their new Del Medio Park, which is just a few blocks away, where they just tore down 2 houses and built a new park, and it has the densest number of people per square inch in that park I had ever seen.
Yeah.
If you go there on any afternoon, any evening, like between 5 and 7. So I thought just, very interesting use of, it's an example, it's a study on how to do something in a small space.
Okay, thanks. That's good. Good to know. Anything else? Then we would have a motion to adjourn until November.
Do you want to do tentative agenda for next?
I thought we just did. No, I really did.
Okay.
Yeah, but
We got the CIP.
we got the CIP. We've got Rinconada Park.
Yeah. It's also an item, it's called the Get to Know Your Neighbors Grant. I think that's what it's called. Is that right, Councilmember Schmidt? Which is the council committed $25,000, I think, as small grants to help folks have block parties and other things. And the council, at some point when they approved that, asked that the commission take a look at that after the first year to see how well it worked. And so we'll be bringing that back in November to tell you about how many grants went out, what it was used for. So that'll be coming.
And then the council prep too is.
Council prep
is
will be
on there.
back on.
Right.
So we have at least 4 items.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Did we decide on a December meeting and the date of a December meeting? My hope was that we would meet December 10th, because that would be right before
That's the study session.
December
The
2nd.
The 9th is a study session.
Actually, it's December 2nd.
What?
Yeah, it's not the 2nd.
A study session with council?
And I think
second?
yeah, it is.
That's moved.
We got bumped by,
I had the 9th.
As my son has off that day. And it's the continuation of Thanksgiving week. Can they change that? Because I
We could
thought
look
it
at
was
that.
going to be wide. I fly home that day.
how other commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm in town.
So this is the Tuesday after.
It's a Monday.
It's Monday.
Monday.
It's Monday after Thanksgiving week.
Monday.
So our normal meeting would be on the 24th, if we had a normal meeting besides the council session, so. That's why I thought we had backed it up 2 weeks, and I thought we had said we weren't gonna have a meeting, that we were just gonna have the council study session, and then if it was looking busy, we would schedule a meeting. That's my
Well,
recollection.
and
Our secretary agrees, so that's good.
But are you concerned about the EIR?
Yes, I am.
I think that's really important.
And that might be the only thing on the agenda, which is more than enough for one meeting, that one topic.
Can we tag that on to the end of the joint council session?
I
That's
thought
only an hour.
I
Yeah.
thought about that, but if it's December 2nd, which it is, I'm not sure we'll be ready with the EIR.
Do we have any flexibility to put the council meeting the week after the 9th?
It originally was the 9th
But I
and,
mean, now that would be the 16th.
the 16th.
Is that too close to
That's
home?
getting pretty close.
Yeah.
Might work, I don't know.
I can ask.
That's a week and a half before Christmas.
I know, I'm sorry.
I can't make every meeting, and that's fine.
Fine. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I didn't change.
I had it.
Old.
So the 9th, Rob, the 9th isn't a possibility?
We got, I can't recall exactly what happened, but we got bumped. The clerk's office said you've been moved.
You don't know what the reason is.
And I don't know what the reason was. I think it was probably another commission that had too many commissioners that couldn't make the 2nd or something, and they swapped.
So do you want to hold the 9th then for a commission meeting for the tree mitigation if we need it?
The 10th, the Tuesday,
Yeah.
So move it from the 24th to the 10th.
of December.
Yes, December 10th.
And that way, the Planning and Transportation Commission meets on the 11th, and then they'll be hearing the EIR report right after the Parks and Rec Commission, which will be nice. And then, in fact, it'd be great to have some Park and Rec Commissioners at the Planning Commission meeting to speak.
Which is the 11th?
The 11th, yep.
So the 10th would be our meeting, the 11th is.
Yeah, our meeting's at
Okay, and then who are you missing on the 2nd? Abby? Okay.
Which is, it is unfortunate, because you do this once a year, and meet with the council, and so I do feel,
If I did
bad
have
about that.
plane tickets, I would make it happen.
no, it's not your, it's not you.
I swear, but,
So I,
well,
it-
it's 6 o'clock at night.
Okay, so we're going to go with the 10th for our meeting
a regular meeting.
and the 2nd for the council study session.
What did you say was on the agenda at the planning meeting?
The golf course EIR.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, now we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Uh-oh.
So we're meeting next.
The meeting on November 19th is at Cubberley Community Center in room H1.
Which meeting?
November 19th.
19th. Cumberly H1.
What was that again?
The November
Meeting
regular
or the-
meeting on November 19th
We're not here.
is at Cubberley Community
We
Center.
stand adjourned.
And it's adjourned.
Yes.
I was so embarrassed. I didn't know who she was.
Later, Sarah Vaughn heard a young Diane Reeves open for her with Clark Terry and offered a tough but sincere compliment.
She actually sat out and listened to me. And then afterwards she came back and she said, as long as you live, I don't ever want you opening for me again. And so I started to cry.